Hi, this is David Benezra with my co-host Kevin Stapleton, and you are at the Captain's Table, where we have a very interesting guest, Ben Braun, who has quite a resume in college basketball. Ben, how you doing?
Good, guys. Thank you for having me.
Oh,
I'm going to give a little background information before we get going that I found interesting. I had to do my own research for this. Of course, your father, rest in peace, was a movie producer, Zev Braun. You were born in Chicago, and I found it interesting you played both baseball and basketball in high school. And you attended the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, and after 1 year, which I'll have to ask you why in a minute, transferred to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where you earned a teaching degree in English with a minor in African American Studies in 1975. So, that said, I'm going to basically ask three questions from that. One, having a father in the movie industry, but no real interest in film.
No, it's funny. I was just too busy, really, with sports growing up. Any waking moment I had was just out and about. Back in the days, there were no cell phones and there were no, iPads. So we just got on our bikes, rode into the neighborhood and the fields and the courts, and we played. And we got home at dark. That's just what it was. And I didn't have any interest in anything else, including academics for many years. That's another story. But in fact, I do have one funny story. In high school, we had a really good team, both in basketball and high school. And at New Trier, we were, top 15, top 20 team in the state. We went to the Sweet 16, played against C.J. Kupek, who many of you still remember.
Sure.
And I remember being at that game, and the Northwestern coach was there scouting a player, and the player didn't do as well as I did. The game he came to scout me at, I think I was 10 for, I don't think I was 10 for 10 from the floor, and they were 3-point shots, but we didn't have a three-pointer then.
right.
So he said, look, I'm recruiting the wrong guy. He said, let me come in and see you at your school. I'm going to offer you a scholarship. And then he came by, and the transcripts came, and he looked at me. He says, you got to be kidding me. I said, what? He said, you're at New Trier, the top public school in the country, and these are your grades? I said, Coach, you didn't come here to recruit me because I can read English and I'm a student in English. You came here because I can shoot the basketball, I think. He said, yeah, but I can't get you in with these grades. So I said, oops. So that was that. That was my lost opportunity. But I went to Wisconsin La Crosse because my high school coach knew the coach there. It was a way to get away. And then I stayed there a year, and I transferred back to Wisconsin for a couple of reasons. One, I wasn't doing, again, the theme of not doing well academically was sitting in. I just said, I've got to get serious about academics. I was supposed to go to Wisconsin and either play baseball or basketball. I didn't play either. I just put myself into the academics, became an honor student there, and got my teaching degree. So the school there really transformed me in many ways. Maybe I was a late bloomer. I figured out I probably wasn't going to be a pro the rest of my life. Although in baseball, my backup player in high school was Johnny Castino, who ended up playing in the major leagues and was an all-star third baseman for the Twins. So I always joked that maybe I should have stayed in baseball, not basketball.
Yeah.
So that's how that goes. But that's my journey. And my dad was fortunate. Dave, you knew him pretty well. He was quite a guy. He really was big on artistic films and movies and doing the right thing in the film business. Didn't make a ton of money, but he sure put together some really good TV shows. Tour of Duty, he did, which was award-winning. He did some movies that got some acclaim as well. So I'm proud of what he did, and I just never got involved in the movie part, but I admired what he did. My brother was also involved. He was an editor for Survivor, and for all those years, and he did well in the movie television business. So it's been in our family, but I never got involved with that. I stayed in sports.
Gotcha. Now, not too many people, and certainly not Caucasians, were taking a minor in African American Studies back in 1975. So that was just, obviously you had an interest, I'm assuming, but why?
Well, it's interesting, David. You always pick out these things that nobody else will grill me on because you do your homework. You always have. But you're right, and I've been asked that a couple times. But most of the players and the people I was in school with, who were friends of mine from Chicago, they were majoring in African American Studies. I took some classes with them. I found the classes really interesting. Wisconsin, as you know, was kind of a liberal, a very liberal school. And,
that's right.
And I thought it was a very progressive school, not just for blacks, but for Asian, Jewish community. It's just very diverse. And I just really fell in love with the classes, the professors, and I also knew I was going to teach, and I wanted to coach, so I thought that would be a good major minor to add to my degree, and so that's why I did it. So I think it's helped me through the years. I think that was something that I wish more more kids could be exposed to that without getting wrapped up in the political stuff that's going on today. Just it's a part of our history. We can't erase it.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to get along with people of different races, religions, you're going to struggle in this world. And I think that's why we have so many problems today. People, we find ways to exclude, not include. And I think we should work on the inclusivity, not exclusivity.
Things were a lot more segregated then.
Yeah.
And on the
my goodness.
And on the side, and we're going to get to this later, but I can't help mentioning it. You love food. And on the side, I would say I was in Madison just once with former college coach Dave Bowinkle, and he was big on the sausages. So you are in sausage heaven in Madison, right? I mean, that was
that and cheese with the cheese heads and bratwurst. You're in beer, which I didn't know what a wine was until I got to California. I'd go on these tours with the Cal alums and people, and they'd parade me to these functions, and I'd say, "This is a wonderful Merlot you have here." And they said, "No, Coach, Merlot." I went, "Yeah, Merlot." Merlot. Yeah, I don't know what they were called. I was drinking beer, and that was my beverage of choice growing up in Wisconsin. Actually, I was born in Milwaukee, but I only lived there a couple of years. Then we grew up in Chicago. So having taught high school in Racine, Wisconsin, I was always around good beer, good cheese, and good bratwurst.
There you go. It's like a holy trinity.
Yeah.
You began your coaching career right away in 1975 as an assistant at Washington Park High School in Racine, which you just mentioned, Racine. And then after 2 years, accepted a position as the head coach at Siena Heights University, NAIA level, where you coached for 8 years. And I saw something funny about that one, a school that didn't have a gym, although it had a bingo hall.
Oh, yeah, that was our own court. And we played the bingo hall. There was a stage there. We had standing room only every night. I used to say that to our recruits, like, we're going to have sold out crowds.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't tell them how many. And, we had to roll the baskets up, roll them down, wait for the bridge and the bingo and everything to clear out. But that's where we practiced and played. And then the following year, I was fortunate. They actually built a new kind of convocation, field house, Siena Heights Field House, which was great. And we were able to play in a real arena the next year, or not arena, but, a field house, which was wonderful. It had a couple of courts there. So we had a JV team that could practice, a varsity team that can run track. There was a bunch of things, practice baseball in the place. So it ended up being pretty good. And Siena Heights was a wonderful, wonderful school academically. Got my master's degree there. They used to bless me every morning. They'd say, "This is great. We have a Jewish guy in a Dominican place here, and they'd come by and they'd really make me feel at home there. I mean, it was a wonderful education. The Dominican sisters were just wonderful.
Did you have a contact or connection there? Because
I did. The person that hired me, Orby Moss, was the AD there that had just left Wisconsin Parkside, and he knew me from Wisconsin, and he grabbed me and he said, "Listen, I want you to help start this program. We've only had a basketball program for one year here, and it was a women's program before. So that's what they did, and I came with him blind faith, and he said, "Listen, we're going to build this program. I want you to run it." And so I took the faith. I left my high school, which was a pretty solid position, but he said, "Look, you're going to have a chance to coach in college. You can always go back to high school, but you may never get a chance to coach in college again. I'm offering you a head coaching job." So I took it.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Yeah, no, it was fun. And I was able to recruit with financial aid. That was my package. I put together financial aid, and I pretty much recruited the city of Detroit and built a program from kids from inner city, which was good because a lot of those kids got away to Adrian. It was good academically, socially, and we had a lot of success.
There's a lot to be said when you're a young coach and you're in that type of position, because you kind of have to put your hand into and onto everything. So it's a great teaching tool, right? I mean, heck,
Oh, absolutely.
literally, I've talked to
Absolutely.
guys in the past that said at one point they had to drive the bus because,
No, I did all that
whatever.
until they
So,
saw how I drove. And my assistants took that away from me. Then I washed uniforms, the colors all ran, and then I packed the lunches, and kids were throwing up. So they took all that away from me. But I did do all that until they realized there was probably somebody better for that. Coach, we'll handle that. Just get on the bus, get your game plan together. But I did, I swept the floors, washed uniforms, did it all.
Did you have to
get an appreciation?
Did you have to do the scheduling then, Ben?
Oh, everybody wanted to play us. They were the nicest guys in the world. Hey, the coach, we're welcome to, Adrian, Michigan. We'd love to play you, and we're going to play at your place. You don't even need to play at our place. And they'd come in here and drill us. I mean, so I knew why. They knew we weren't very good. And then,
well, it's only it was the second year of the team. People were lining up.
First year we took a beating. In the second year, we got even with those guys. I went and recruited a lot of kids from junior colleges and some pretty good high school players, like I said, from Detroit. We ended up winning 24 games the second year after we had lost 24 games. So it was quite a turnaround. Yeah.
24-game turnaround.
That's probably a record at that school.
Yeah, probably. I don't know, but we had a guy. Remember going to see a junior college player by the name of Fred Walker, who's since passed away. But we showed up there, and his coach said, "There's a guy that you can get." He said, "Tell me what you think," because we heard he was a pretty good player. We got there, and he had 39 points at half.
Yeah.
And I said, "We'll take him." I said, "I'm up." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "The game's it's halftime." I said, "I've got to go home. He's good enough. Let's just send him." So we used to get some pretty good players back then. He's from Gary, Indiana. God rest his soul.
Yeah.
And we had some really good players. I mean, we really did there. It was, like I said, the PSL in Chicago, in Detroit was really good. I got to know the coaches there. They were very supportive of our program and me, and built the relationships. And I'm sure Dave will get into that later, but that's part of coaching. You better build some relationships and have coaches and parents and AU and high school coaches believe in what you're doing, because that's how you build a program.
Yeah.
And then after 8 years there of building that program from the ground up, you were offered and accepted the position of associate head coach at Eastern Michigan. And midway through your first year, you became the interim head coach.
Yes. That was interesting. Jim Boyce, who recruited me there as his associate, because I had been a head coach 8 years, he actually resigned about 5 games into the season. So I was a assistant coach in my 35 plus years, in college. I was assistant for like maybe 2 months.
Did you have any inkling when you took that job that
not at all?
This was a possibility?
None. I tried to talk Jim into resigning, not to resign. I said, "Jim, why don't you wait till after the year?" He says, "No." He said, "I know what I want to do." He said, "Plus, this gives you a chance to coach the team, and you'll do fine." And he did it kind of for me too, which was, I never forget that. Jim has since passed away, but he was somebody who was really good to me. Former assistant coach at Dick Vitale, assistant coach at Michigan when he was Detroit, there, Johnny Orr, and just a great guy. But he did it for me too. And he said, "I want you to take this program over, and I think you have a chance to become the next head coach." And
so
I didn't.
Was he just tired of coaching at that point?
Yeah, I think he didn't think the season was going well. He had a couple losing years, and I just think he didn't want to go through the agony of maybe being fired, of being relieved of his duties. And he just resigned. And so I was really surprised. But funny story, the sequel to that is, so I take the program over, and we, had some pretty competitive games after that. And then at the end of the year, they start opening the job up, and they had these really good coaches coming in for interviews. And then the AD, who was Gene Smith, who is now the very famous AD at Ohio State.
Right.
He said, "Ben, I want you to host these guys and show them around." I said, "Wait, let me get this straight. You want me to host these candidates and show them around? You want me to take them out to dinner? I mean, what do you want? Wine and dine them and then tell them to take the job?" He said, "Well, yeah, I mean, you know the program good enough. You know all these guys." I said, "Okay." Everyone who came in, I told them they weren't going to get the job. They should go home. And they would come back to see Gene, and Coach Braun said, "I'm not going to get the job. I just should go home." And he looked back and he said, "You didn't say that." I said, "Absolutely. What do you want me to do? You want me to, if you don't want to give me the job, don't give me the job, but I'm not going to go, promote somebody else when I'm already the head coach. I've done all the work here." So we had a good laugh about it. And he ended up hiring me. He hired me, which was a great thing. And he showed a lot of faith in me. And the rest was history. We had a very good run there. And I don't think, Dave, you know this, and Kevin, I mean, but I'll release it on this podcast. It might be a first, but
okay. I'm sorry to cut you off. We're gonna take a quick break, so hold that thought.
I got an interesting one for you on the other side. So
okay.
I'll wait.
Okay. So we're gonna take a break now. We're talking with Ben Braun, and we'll be back in a sec. Ben Ezra with Kevin Stapleton, and we've got Ben Braun, and we are talking about his sojourn, so to call it, at Eastern Michigan, and he has something he wants to relate that he thinks is pretty funny.
Well, no, this is interesting. So I, again, didn't know I'd be at Eastern 11 years. That's pretty long in today's profession. Had some really good teams. Had a nationally ranked team that, obviously three NCAA tournament teams, three MAC championship teams. Our team went to additionally, I think 2 or 3 NITs. Mm-hmm. But we advanced to a Sweet 16, played North Carolina, and we gave them a heck of a game. I had a couple of pros on that team, ended up playing the NBA. So, Dean Smith was very complimentary, and we'll get back to him later because if I'm going to face him again at Cal, I always ended up facing Dean Smith in the Sweet 16, as luck would have it. That's not who you want to face. But, we did that, and then we also beat Duke in the NCAA pretty soundly. And then we were up 16 on UConn until their Israeli guard posted up our 5'5" guard, 6'6" over 6'5", and Earl Boykins to this day still says, "Coach, I should have fronted him." I said, "Yes, Earl, you should have." But Earl is the best, maybe probably about the best player I've ever coached. So he and I have a great relationship, and he always felt like we should have won that game. We were up 16 and a half, and I think we could have advanced. But a lot of success at Eastern Michigan. Again, got to know the community. People there are very supportive. Continued the same theme of recruiting kids out of the Detroit metropolitan area. The Ypsilanti really came out. We had sold out games house, Bone Field House. It was packed, and we really had it going. We beat Wisconsin. We were up 57-13, I think, or 15 to them at half. They were nationally ranked. We were good, and we beat, I think, 4 or 5 Pac-12 teams, a couple Big Ten teams, including Jed Heathcote. So we had things going. But what was amazing is now, all these years later, I get a call from their former Vice Chancellor, Roy Gobanks. He says, "Ben, I want you to send me your resume." I said, "Wait a minute, Roy, you want what?" He said, "Yeah, just send me your resume because I need it. I got it. I have to have it." I said, "Roy, I'm not coming back to coach." He said, No, I need it for somebody else to send it to me." We're trying to get something. I said, "Well, can you give me a clue?" He says, "Well, it's going to surprise you, but I'll tell you what we're doing." And so he got with the Board of Trustees, the Regents, Chancellor, Athletic Director, School President, and they passed a resolution, and they're naming the basketball court after me, which was
Whoa.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Humbling thing for me and my family.
Yeah. Wow,
it's going to happen next year, I think, opening game, and we're going to fly back out. It's going to be a pretty emotional day, but he said that we wanted to do that to honor you, what you did before, what you did here. We've had, it's been pretty special. So I said, wow. So really, that to me was just probably as special a moment as I've had in my coaching career. I didn't ever think that would happen, but they're doing it. So.
Well, you deserve it, because besides those accomplishments you listed, you are the winningest coach in the history of Eastern Michigan basketball.
Yeah, that's what they told me, and they said I've done some things there that and I appreciated it. I cut my teeth there as a Division I coach. And I loved that. It was a hard decision for me to leave there to come to Cal, because the team we had was probably going to go back and be even better the next year. Yeah. And we were very good. We were rated one of the top teams in the country at the end of the year. So, but it's part of the journey. I actually went to Earl Boykins. I said, "Earl, I got this job offer. I'm not leaving. If you want me to stay, I told you I'd be there for your career when I recruited you." He says, "Coach, you got to take that job. It's a big opportunity. I'll be fine. We're going to be fine." And he actually gave me a blessing, and I ended up taking the job.
Well, I want to ask you mentioned, of course, that you guys defeated Duke, and
yep.
I believe that was your last season at EMU when you defeated them in the tournament, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, obviously, that's an impressive win. So, all of a sudden, did that help not just make you hot, so to speak, besides your body of work? And on top of that, when you wound up, I don't know if you interviewed for more jobs than just the Cal job, but did that come up in interviews as
Well, it's
well?
interesting. I actually had flown out and interviewed for the University of San Francisco job, and the AD said, "Listen, you can't take this job. I think we can't pay you what you really deserve to make." He said, "I just wanted you to come out here because you're a good coach. I'm friends with the AD. It makes me look good. You came out here for the job." So I didn't take the job, and then a year later, I take the Cal job.
Yeah,
And
How about that?
We played his team. Yeah, so it worked out after all. I love the Bay Area, and but no, it's the journey's fun to look back at now. There's so many twists and turns, but I've always been in programs where I really wanted to stay as long as I could. None of the programs I've worked at were ever what you call blue bloods. There was always something on the surface wrong, either challenging about them, whether it's Siena Heights, being an all-girls school, now charting a program with no gym, and Eastern Michigan, they were in dead last place, and that was not going anywhere. And then Cal, when I got there, was on probation because we were almost on the death penalty. So I had to take some of those places and some of those jobs, but I don't know if I know it any other way. I just, blue collar, you get guys that believe in building programs, and that's kind of what I did. I don't know what I'd do if I ever got a program that was supposed to be the championship team. I'd probably screw it up. So I'm glad I took those jobs.
Well, knowing you, I think that part of your psyche is you like a challenge.
Yep.
You can look at things like anybody, but you can look at things and say, okay, this is what I see here. These are the good things I see here that we could work with or build on instead of the negatives. And
no, you're right, Dave. So you're right, and I think when you and I formed our relationships, I obviously saw something was pretty special, and I'm thank God that UCLA didn't see it, or USC. But I went down there with Scott Beaton. I said, Scott, this program down here, this Rockfish program, it's pretty damn good. And he said, yeah. I said, there's not one player, though, on this team I like. He said, what do you mean there's not one player on this team you like? I said, I like all of them. I said, we got to sign the whole team. Everybody on those teams back then, when I came to Cal, I said, why aren't these kids being recruited by, the UCLAs, the USCs? He said, I don't know. They were overlooked. They were maybe rated 5-star, which is a joke to me that we go on these rankings by some of the folks that never played or never coached. So and so we ended up, as you know, Dave, that we were very successful to build our program, going into that new field house, building a program from some of your very best players. And it was fun. It was just fun to see that group kind of as a family help build our program.
Yeah, it was, I loved it, obviously, because I was close to those guys, and it was a great time. And it's funny you mentioned that, because, although I'd had a cup of coffee at the NC2A level, but I didn't enjoy the experience, it's hard to explain to college coaches, basically, that this kid's pretty good. And so what if USC and UCLA aren't recruiting him? But they look at that right away as, well, we got to compete against USC and UCLA. So if they don't want you, why should we want this kid type of thing?
It's interesting. And they got a little overlooked, and then they always had a chip on their shoulder when we played them. People say, well, how were you so successful against USC? I used to say it was the coaching, but it wasn't. It was what we did. What we did, though, is we went in there and we used that as a chip on the shoulder. Those kids got a chance to play in front of their families. They weren't going to let them down, and they wanted to prove that they were good enough and they could have played at those schools. So we did very well against USC, and people don't realize this. We actually beat UCLA 9 straight years. We would have beat them at 10th, and Josh Shipp shot an illegal shot over the backboard, and he's the brother of Joe Shipp, who I coached. And they allowed the shot, then later said it was illegal, but we would have beat them then 10 straight years, at least one time for 10 straight years. So we had success against those programs.
Yeah, for sure. Now at Cal, of course, you're named head coach prior to the 96-97 season. Preseason expectations were low. I read Cal was predicted by everybody to finish in the bottom half of the conference, but the team finished tied for second in the conference, and you reached the NC2A Sweet 16. The record for that year was 23-9, which was also another record for you as far as was a record for a Cal coach in his first year on the job. And you were named the Pac-10 Coach of the Year out of the box, becoming the first Cal coach to win the award. So
I didn't know all that, Dave. You helped me.
Well,
Jeez.
what's amazing about that is that Pete Newell coached at Cal.
Yeah, no, let me tell you, Pete was such a big part of my tenure at Cal. He was at practices. We were
Oh, really?
at my house. Oh, he was such a big part of what we did. He was supportive to me, appreciative of what we were building there. He, I couldn't ask for a better supporter and
Yeah.
somebody I admired. I've been at his big man camps all those years. Used to send my players there, but
Yeah.
he was a genius, but even more of than a better coach. He was a good coach. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
He cared about the game. He cared about kids,
Yeah.
and he was something.
Everybody says that about him.
No,
what a great
he had a way
person
about
he was.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was watching us practice one day, and I had Sean Lampley, who was at the time a leading scorer, graduate leading scorer at Cal from Chicago. And then Jerome Randall came in later, who I recruited, ended up being the leading scorer at Cal. But Lampley was there one day, and I could never get Lamp to play any defense. He says, Ben, let me handle this. I said, but Pete, he said, you trust me? I said, yeah. He said, let me handle this. So he goes up to Lampley, and he says, Sean, he said, listen. He said, I don't care what Coach Braun says about you not playing defense. I look at Pete like, Pete, he says, he looked at me and winks. He said, I don't care what he says. He says, don't ever listen to what he says. He said, don't ever let anybody tell you you can't play defense. And then Lampley looks at me like, uh-huh. He said, you know why, Sean? And Sean goes, no, why, Coach? He says, because you never tried.
He dropped the hammer on him.
Yeah, he dropped it right. He said, yeah, because you never tried. He said, don't let anybody tell. And so then he looks at me and he said, you can always tell a freshman, but you can't tell him much. So that was my other Pete Newell. But no, we had some great times. And, I'm just reminded though of not only the relationships I had with, high school coaches, Dave, AAU coaches, but I was really blessed. I had some really good assistant coaches who went on to become successful. And so, that's how you build programs. You don't do it by yourself. I never, ever had a magic potion. You just do it as a community. It's a community effort.
Yeah.
Now, the MAC, of course, has actually always had a good basketball tradition, but still, because it's a high major conference, people would say the Pac-10 was a big step up. And looking at those preseason predictions, nobody thought you would field a competitive team. So I want you to go back in your mind, see if you can answer this one. Do you remember what you were thinking the first time you were actually able to see your team practice? And then what was your approach with the team to all of these preseason predictions on top of the fact that you were a brand new head coach?
When I was at Cal. Well, the first practice I remember, I knew some of the guys in the team, believe it or not, because they had played in a summer camp over at Eastern Michigan, the ABCD. Sonny Vaccaro and Lou Reno was running the camp then. Then I ended up becoming one of my assistants, long-term associate. But I remember first day of practice almost, and I go, pretty talented, this group, but they were a little disjointed. There wasn't a lot of trust going on. They weren't real confident. And there was all kinds of question marks. And then I remember the first day, I said, I got to come here. I got to be decisive and start defining roles. So I remember our point guard, Prentice Recruiter, took a shot, and I blew the whistle. I said, Prentice, I said, that's not a good shot for you. And that really wasn't a bad shot, but I'll get to the point in a second. He said, well, Coach, he looked at me in front of the whole team and said, I was open. I said, yes, Prentice, you were, and there's a reason why you're open. So the whole team lost it. He looks at me, and I knew Prentice from Benton Harbor. He shook his head. I said, now, Prentice, you'll never be the leading scorer for our team, but you could lead the Pac-10 at the time and assist. And they ended up doing that. That's why, and so his role was defined. And we just went out there and started defining roles.
Yeah.
And Ed Gray, I just gave him one job, shoot. He didn't have anything else to do. I didn't worry about any other thing. Just get yourself open, score, take it to the basket, pull up, tremendous pull-up jump shooter.
Yeah.
Was drafted, and he goes for 48 points in his last game. His last game of the season, he got injured with about 10 minutes to go in the game. He had about 60 or 70, but he got injured, and then he was out for the rest of the year. So we played the NCAA tournament, went to the Sweet 16 without him, and we just couldn't advance past North Carolina. I think if that great plays for us, we not only advanced, I think we could have won the whole thing because Arizona won the whole thing. We were the last team to beat Arizona that year.
That's right.
So, just the way it goes.
It's funny when you look back at it, isn't it? I mean, some of these things. Now, Cal had some basketball history, but despite having had Hall of Famer Pete Newell as one of their head coaches, not any real basketball tradition, I would say. So
Right.
what I'm getting to is, of course, you eventually moved into Haas Pavilion, which had been a Harmon gym. That had to be a big selling point. But I want to know, do you feel that the success you had right off the bat helped with recruiting despite the upcoming probation and or changed the type of player that would
did,
consider
Dave.
Cal? Yeah?
It did, and I'll tell you what happened. You're right. When you go and you advance, you're one of the top 16 teams in the country. People saw you. I mean, we tried to get the Collins twins, and they weren't going to come because they didn't want to be on probation. So we lost them. We lost a bunch of kids that I thought we could have got. But I think in the long run, we still had the name Cal meant something, and certainly academically, great school, good conference, people like the West Coast schools, our schedule. And so I think we were able to sign kids, even though we didn't have our own gym. People don't realize this. We didn't have a gym for 2 years. We had to play at the Warriors facility, which thank God we had. Gary St. Jean did us a solid, and he was really nice to me. And he said, look, you guys can come in here, practice here for 2 years. And I don't even think he charged us. We came in there every day. We didn't have our own locker. The kids brought backpacks, took a bus in there. And that was our home for 2 years. But I used to kid PJ Carlissimo at the time. I said, PJ, we're playing in the Oakland Arena, and so are you. He said, yeah. I said, how come we're out? I said, how come we're outdrawing you? he said, F you, Braun. He said, we were getting 10 a game. He was getting about 7. And then, of course, he had his own problems. And one of them by the name of Latrell Sprewell. I was there the day that thing happened. We came in right after it happened. And Muggsy Bogues said, Coach, listen, I'm sorry I was late to speak to your team. I said, but Muggsy, don't worry about it. I said, no, I'm never late. He said, but you'll read about it tomorrow. I just can't talk about it. And so the next day I said, Muggsy, you didn't tell me. So I couldn't, Coach. He said, I was just trying to keep one of our players from killing our coach.
Oh my God.
Because it was that bad. I mean, that was, and PJ could get after you, by the way. Not that I think what Latrell Sprewell did was right, but PJ could put a dig in you pretty hard. And he didn't let up, and neither did Sprewell, and then the rest was history. But now I look back to those 2 years, and we found a way. Even though for those 2 years, we didn't have our own gym, we still found a way to go to that Oakland Arena and have success. We actually beat 3 top 10 teams at the Oakland Arena one year, and they didn't let us into the NCAA tournament. I was really disappointed, and I thought that NCAA was taking it out on us because we beat, I think, North Carolina, Arizona, UCLA, and they voted us out. We voted us out. So what we did, we turned lemons into lemonade. We went to the NIT, and we won the whole NIT. So it was – that's what you do when you don't like what happens.
And that's when the NIT was still a really good tournament.
The NIT, yeah. Let's take a break right there, and we will come back with Ben Braun at the captain's table. Welcome back to the captain's table. This is David Benez with Kevin Stapleton, and we were talking to Ben Braun, and we left off about the team having to go to the NIT despite beating 3 top 10 teams in one season. And Coach Braun has an interesting sideline to that.
Well, we got to the. I remember one of our top players, Thomas Kilgore, was really severely hobbled, and he had a really bad ankle and leg. And our trainer said, "Look, I can get him ready to play one game. You want him for the final, or do you want him for the semis?" I said, "No, it's got to be the semis. If I wait to get to the final, we won't get there." He was too good. So he went through treatments and whatever it took, and we played, and he played well, and we got there. And then, of course, he couldn't walk the next day. But we finally get to the championship game. We played without Thomas. We had Gino Carlisle was one of our leaders. And, some good players in that team, Francisco Elston, Sean Marks, some really good players. And so, what's interesting is was Sean on that team? I think he was on that team. Yeah. But we had some good players. And so what ended up happening is we get to the championship game, and we played against a really good team from Clemson. Larry Shiat was the coach, and they were good. And so we were playing, and I'm like looking at my assistant coach, and I say, "What is Gino doing out there?" As his coach, he doesn't know what he's doing. When we're supposed to be in man, he was in zone. When we're supposed to be zone, he was man. Just does his own thing. I said, "Well, that's what the heck." But then I realized the other team didn't know what we were doing, and so they couldn't solve our defense. And after the game, I got coaches around the country saying, "Coach, can you give me some insight on that great matchup we played?" I said, "Sure." I said, "One of our players didn't know if we were man or zone, and neither did the other team." So there's my secret. I probably let it out for the first time after all these years that matchup zone was purely by accident. But it was good because they did not know if we were literally in man or zone because Dino kept doing his own thing, and we was a heck of a defense.
One kid freelancing. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Let's touch on recruiting just for a sec. We had your former assistant, Scott Beaton, do a show. And you had hired him, I think, in 97, I believe. And, over time, before he had come with you, Scott had developed a reputation for finding European talent. Because when he was at GW, they had a lot of European kids, especially Russians, Belarusians, whatever. Now, that led him to receiving a tip from a European contact to go check out a blonde-haired German teenager playing for a second division club. And so what I heard is when Scott joined your staff, he urged you to fly to Europe and watch Nowitzki play.
Well, we went to a tournament. You're right. And Dirk was maybe 14 years old at the time. And I'm looking at this kid, just this bouncy kid, big, tall kid, but he wasn't a big guy. And I'm saying, "Scott, who's he going to guard? How's he going to?" He said, "Coach, you got to get over this. He's not a big guy. He can shoot." I said, "You know what? He'd be a stretch four probably for us." And the more we watched him play, the better he got. And sure enough, we thought we were going to get that kid. We recruited him hard, went to Europe a couple times, went to Germany, spent time with his family. They came over and visited with his coach, Holger Geschwinder, and we had a chance to get him. And then he went to play in the Nike Hoop Summit, and he lit up the United States team. And the pros went, "That's it, Donnie." It was Donnie Nelson with Dallas said, "We're taking you." And so that was the end of Dirk. I think he was going to come to Cal. And Scott did do a great job. He was, as good a recruiter and new talent, but he worked. He really had great relationships overseas. And so we were, Francis Felsen played for us. We recruited there. We recruited a couple of kids out of Israel that were very good. So we were able to use the international connection we had. But Scott was a wonderful
I wanted to
ambassador.
talk to you specifically, though, about Nowitzki's unofficial visit to Cal, because what I read is that, and this isn't from Scott, but I read that you were more excited about Nowitzki after you challenged him to a tennis match at the Berkeley Tennis Club.
Oh, I said, I said, "Listen, let's play some tennis." And I said, "If you win, you're coming here." And, he said, "Well, Coach, you're not going to beat me." I said, "Well, Dirk, you're a basketball player. There's no way you're beating me. I play tennis. You're too big. You're too slow." And we started playing, and Holger was watching, and I'm like looking at this kid, like this kid was all over the net. He could get to anything. He served at a trajectory. I mean, the kid was really good. I said, "I've seen enough. I'm not going to finish this match because I don't want to take a loss." I said, "And plus it's probably illegal." So I said, "You still got to come to Cal." so yeah, he was he really, I didn't know this, but he played tennis coming up, and he was a very good tennis player in his own right. And maybe not Boris Becker good, but he was awfully good coming up, and when he was a youngster.
Well, you could tell by his footwork, in the NBA, his footwork was always so unbelievable.
No, phenomenal.
You could see where he'd be, a great tennis player. You're right.
Phenomenal. No, he was a gifted kid and special kid. He just, he was competitive, but he was talented. He worked at it. He worked so many ways of getting a shot off, kept the ball up. He's you talk about Larry Bird, and I know Larry Bird's legendary, but if you got to be able to put Dirk in the same category as, if you look at all the things he accomplished. Didn't get as many championships as Bird, but that kind of special player in terms of what he did, and made his team good, made everybody better, and it was just pretty much unstoppable. You couldn't stop him. He was
that's right.
feisty guy.
Another guy he reminded me of was, like, I always thought of him as a taller Kiki Vandeweghe type of a guy also.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, Dave. Kiki was also at 6'9", and just really good. Kiki more of a forward, Dirk more of a guard.
Yeah.
But they were both, really good footwork, tough. And so that's, I like that comparison. But no, it's, I talk about the ones that got away. Dirk, I thought, was coming to Cal. I really thought we had him, and I had a chance to recruit a couple other guys. I'm embarrassed to tell you that Steve Nash, I told him he wasn't good enough to play for me. And he lit me up in front of Jason Kidd and the whole team over in the locker room in front of, at the Phoenix Suns. He said, "Hey, I want everybody to meet Coach Braun. He didn't think I was good enough to play for him." I said, "Oh, boy." And he's smiling, and I gave him a pat on the ass.
Yeah, he had to mention that.
Yeah, but the funny part is that nobody thought he was that good. He was a soccer player, and maybe Dick Davey at Santa Clara kind of figured it out, but not many people thought he was that good. So I kind of let him go, and I also, in my infinite wisdom, let Jeremy Lin. Didn't think he'd be as good as he was, and he could have come to play for us at Cal. But in recruiting, it happens.
If you coach a long time, you've always got some of those. I'm going to try and get through a friend. I'm going to try and get Steve Kerr on. And of course, I cut Steve Kerr from a senior trip he was trying out for in high school. And
welcome to the club.
He did okay. I didn't cause him any long-term trauma. So yeah.
No, he did just fine without you, and these other guys did fine without me. Chuck Hayes is another guy that his dad wanted him to come play Cal, and we had already taken a player. I think, Dave, you knew that, so I couldn't take him. But Chuck was an awfully good player. Went on to play pro and played for Kentucky. But what happens? You're not going to know all the players, and it doesn't. Recruiting is not an exact science. It just does. It just works out that way. So you move on.
Now I can't wait any longer to get to something that I know interests us both, and I don't know if our audience, whoever they are right now, are going to know that either. So let's at least talk a little bit about food. Okay,
let's talk a lot about food. Why only a little bit?
There you go.
This is not the Dave Benezra I know, who I've broken bread with on countless occasions. No, food is a family thing in my family. I think it was in your family, and I think in a lot of Jewish families, to be honest, you discussed, you had discussions around the dinner table, or arguments, if you will, and we would sit down and eat dinner and talk about what we were going to have for breakfast the next day.
Yeah, I mean, I think of you as a foodie, not in that gourmet sense or overly picky sense, but in the sense that you love food, but you also know what good food is. And I don't know how many of your coaching or broadcasting colleagues are aware of that.
No, but it's funny, Dave. I'll give you, this is another one I remember. I remember one time we were at home, and as a coach and as a team, you kind of eat your pre-games about 2 or 3, and you play your games 7 or 8. And the game's over at 9 or 10. You start watching film. So, we had just lost Arizona at home, and I had one of my managers or coaches. I said, "Can you go grab me a hamburger or a hot dog," whatever it was they were serving and they said, "Coach, how could you eat? We just lost Arizona." I said, "Wait, hold. I said, "We lost to Lute Olson." I said, we scouted pretty hard, didn't we? Yeah, we played pretty hard, didn't we? I said, yeah. I said, "I got news for you. I'm not losing twice. Now go get me something to eat." So yeah, I never looked I was not going to starve myself or go on a hunger strike if we lost a game. I figured that you still had to eat. And so, we always sat down and I think we'd plan our meetings, recruiting meetings, and dinners and things around the restaurants or dinner table. I think it's fun. You'd have people there and share different food. I think it's really it's a great way to bond.
That leads to my next thing, which is, I'm not going to name any names, but many legendary athletes used to have a black book. Of course, now it's all on their cell phones, but they used to have a black book that listed the phone numbers of women they were friendly with in every city when they would visit on a road trip. So my question to you is, do you have a book with the numbers and addresses of restaurants that you like to frequent when traveling?
Dave, absolutely. Let me tell you another story. And my coaches were incredulous when they used to see. We put up all the names of the best players in the country, and they put on the board. Now, Coach, you got to go here. In Augusta, you got to go here. I said, whoa. I'm not going to Augusta. I'm not going. There's no restaurants that I know of in Augusta. You guys, I'll recruit. But Coach, there's no players in the city. I said, I don't care. I'm not going to get shut out. I'm going to this city. I'll find a player, but I'm not going to the city without a good restaurant. So I probably missed out on my share of guys because I only went to the good restaurant towns, and I let my assistants go do the other dirty work in the towns where there was no restaurants. Yeah, I got myself in trouble. Well, Dave, absolutely, and Kim, you got to keep a book. I always had a restaurant, whatever city we were going to, night before a game. And a lot of times I took my team there to eat night before a game. We'd eat at somebody's restaurant or some proprietor that I knew, and we'd have a pretty good meal.
Well, I came to this whole foodie thing early on in my relationship with you because you, of course, introduced me to Shenhua, which was a great Chinese restaurant in Berkeley. Sad to see that it's now closed, but
it's closed. But I just was with Ed the other day, the owner, Ed Chu, and we were down in watching Dennis Gates' team play in Sacramento. But yeah, we go down there, and that was really very Berkeley-like restaurant, but it's Chinese and was always bustling. And yep, we had our share of
that was sort of at the time like a twist on traditional Chinese. But I also thought that was literally better than any Chinese food I had had in New York or San Francisco, which are considered two of the top 3 places known for great Chinese food, with Vancouver being the other one. So
Well, and Ed's place was fresh. They'd always made it just right there. Nothing was sitting around. Whatever you ordered was made to order, was there on the table, steaming, and it was the way you wanted it. And so, he actually opened up another restaurant, but I think he's since closed that. I think COVID wasn't so kind, but no, great guy, great restaurant owner, great place. But Berkeley, as you know, has no shortage of restaurants. The problem I had in Houston was I would eat at these places, and in Houston, they don't mess around with the portions. They're ginormous. And so I gained about 25, 30 pounds in Houston, and I have to come back now and just, get down to my playing weight. But Berkeley is really culinary delight here too.
You've always been such a strong workout guy. I cannot picture you putting on 25 pounds.
I did in Houston. If you were going to do it in any city in the world, it's Houston. They have the most, the biggest portions of food I've ever seen. And it's like this one guy said to me the other day. I was on a recruiting trip doing a game for ESPN. I was with Mike Corey, and Mike said, "Coach, we got to go." And he knew about my reputation. We got to go to this one restaurant. It's called I think the Beef Eater Inn or the Beef Master Inn. It's on the way to the game we were going to do in Greenville, South North Carolina. He said, but not many people know about it. It's the place where you go in, they serve steaks and they cut it up at your table, but it's really good. I said, I'm in. So we go there, and the owner, the master there brings this whole slab. And they only serve ribeye there. I said, is there anything else? No, ribeye, baked potato. That's it. And so I said, and Texas toast. I said, I'm in. He brings the meat to the table, and he has this big knife. He says, okay, tell me where you want. How much? I said, how much what? He says, how many ounces? I said, wait a minute, you're asking me I can pick how many ounces I want for steak? He said, that's like asking my daughter how much candy she wants. And he said, take your pick. And I looked at my broadcast partner. I said, Mike, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to get about a 10-ouncer. And I'm competitive. I said, give me 12. I said, we got to go on the air in an hour. I didn't want to fall asleep on the air. So I got the 12-ounce. But trust me, I'm going back there for the 2-pounder.
Wow. Yeah.
No, I got to go back and get my fill. But this place should have been on Guy Fieri's place. I gave him Guy's number. I think it's going to end up being on there because Guy was at our place. He did a show at my house with my wife, who he did a Thanksgiving show here at our house in Berkeley. So I've kept his number, but yeah, don't be surprised if you see that Beef Master in on the Dives Diners.
It's scary. We're 2 peas in a pod because I love his show. I watched that show.
Oh no, we're I'm going to get this guy. The owner there was wonderful, and I can just tell you how good that meat was. It was so good. So yeah, I don't know if our listeners can pick up on this, guys, but if they do, they'll know that we could talk about players and I get excited, but as soon as we start talking about food, there's a whole nother level.
That's another level
going on here.
You have to. I got a place for you. Maybe you've already been there. If you're in Las Vegas, there's a barbecue place called Smoke City, and for some reason, when you look up barbecue in Vegas, all these other places come up. But Kevin and I, the first time we went there, the guy told me you want the beef rib. Now, I'm a guy that I haven't had good experience with beef ribs everywhere I've gone.
No, they're not the same.
Right? There's a little bit of meat on the ends. It's all nothing in between.
No, it's not the same. I agree with you. I don't eat pork, but I tell you this, I don't fault anybody that does because I've seen beef ribs and pork ribs, no comparison. It's just you got to get the beef ribs.
This place is different.
I got to tell you though, this is different because when it came to our table, they all insisted you want the beef rib here. So Kevin and I get the beef rib.
Okay.
We saw it. It looked like it was big. So we thought we'll split an order. Now they only give you 3 ribs, but I'm telling you, it looks like they have dinosaurs out in the back, and they're rotisserie them or something. So we took
brontosaurus bone, my kind of place.
Oh, we took 1 rib, and I cut with a knife. I cut it right. It was so tender. I cut it down on one side and down the other. We each had that. It was so rich and so good. That was it. We had to take the other 2 ribs home back to the hotel.
Wow.
That was it. It wiped us out, but it was phenomenal. I've never had a beef rib like that anywhere. Because I'm with
Can I ask
you.
you guys a question?
Pork is king, you know. But
Well, let me ask you a question. How much longer on this podcast? I got to go look up this flights in the Vegas. I got to get the next flight out. You guys are killing me. I will be there. I will find a way to go there. For some reason, I will get there. But you only have to tell me once. I'll get there.
Next time you're in
wonderful.
Vegas. Let's take a break
I'll be
here
there.
because I feel like a big burp coming on talking about all this food. So we will be back with Ben Braun
Take
in a moment.
break.
We're back at the captain's table. Ben Braun is our guest. And, you missed it if you didn't catch the food segment. And, we could probably do a whole show on food with Coach Braun. Gary Colson, former New Mexico coach, we're going back a ways, once had a saying that you need to get out of town because, when they're going to start getting the posse ready, and you want to get out of town before the posse gets formed, talking about head coaches looking to move on. And so because of that, I think, coaches get a bad rap. All anybody thinks about, unless you're John Wooden or Dean Smith, somebody like that, is that, basically you left a job not on your own terms. And what I want to talk about is Ben Braun was at Cal for 12 seasons, and he took the program when it was not at a good point at all. And you won 219 games, which is second in program history, as is your tenure of 12 years. And that includes a winning percentage of over 600, which is the best at Cal since Pete Newell, who coached there. And Pete didn't coach as long as you did. And you also directed the program to more postseason appearances and more postseason victories than any coach in school history. So what I'm getting to is my guess is that many Cal fans are now appreciating that tenure with the Pac-12 losing USC and UCLA, and also, in my humble opinion, in a tough place because their athletic department debt due to the renovations, additions, improvements made for football, COVID leading to decreased revenue to help service that debt, and the current state of the program, which, kind of went to the dumpster, I would say. And newly named head coach Mark Madsen, whom you know, I consider one of the good guys, and I wish him luck. But right now, I don't think you can actually call the Cal job a good job. At best, it's a tough job, and it may need to become transfer tech more than other schools to be able to do something. And if Oregon and Washington leave for the Big 12 or the ACC or whatever, the job will get that much tougher. Now, that's a lot to digest. That was a long ramble, but basically, would you agree with those sentiments?
Yeah, Dave, it's interesting. Cal's never been an easy job. And you're fighting some things, I think, inherently. I think it's a wonderful school. As you said, there's been some basketball tradition, but it's been a lot of years in between. The school, obviously politically and red tape, it's always been hard to get things going at the school in terms of getting some fundraising going, some other things. But Cal is a beautiful place. And I think with the right support system in place, the right leadership, the right coaching, and you need all of it. You have a coach who didn't have a good record say, well, he's a bad coach, because, you need so many other things to be successful. And if you don't have those things, I was fortunate when I was there. I was there and flourished under the person that brought me in to be the coach. And most coaches will do well if the person that hires them is their leader. And, then when somebody else comes in, they, generally ADs and a lot of leaders want their own people. And so I kind of ran into that when I was at Cal. I had 3 or 4 or 5 actually opportunities to leave for different jobs, most of them in the Big Ten. And I stayed at Cal because I really wanted to be at Cal, and I thought I'd be coaching there for many years. But then, as you mentioned, Dave, we suddenly weren't doing as well as maybe some of the expectations that some people had. An athletic director who thinks you should win more games, they should bring in the office and tell you that. But this person actually went to the press and said that playing in a tournament and having one and done is not acceptable. And I turned to the said AD and I said, "Look, you've been at 3 different schools. How many NCAA tournaments have you been to?" Of course, she said none. And I said, "Okay, well, we've been to 5. I've been to 10 or 8, whatever." I said, I think you got to celebrate when you go to a tournament. If you don't win and you don't advance, maybe you're disappointed, but I think you don't call your program a failure, and you want to celebrate that what your players and what your program has done, for your alumni, for your kids, their parents. You want to make it special. You don't, and I just really resented that. So things didn't go well after that discussion, as you can imagine. And the lifetime contract that I think thought I had, and a lot of coaches think they have, just didn't last. But again, I'm a coach that understands expectations, and I think most coaches' expectations are higher than anybody else that anybody else could have of you as a coach. But I always felt that you needed to get the support of your administration. Those administrators should come by your office and say to you and your staff, "Hey, what do you need? How can I help you become more successful?" And if they're doing that, you're going to be successful. If they're not doing that, Dave, Kevin, you're not gonna be as successful. John Kasser hired me, Bob Driscoll, who went on to be very successful at Providence. Those guys, hired Ed Cooley. Bob did one of the best ADs in the country, and Ed very well. He used to recruit your program. We used to have to go up against him. Used to get me upset. I tell him to go back on the East Coast, stop bothering me, the West Coast guys. But you have a good AD, and those people support you. And if your AD is supportive as a program, you're going to be successful. And I really hope Mark Madsen can do well, but he's going to need the support of his athletic administration. He's going to need the support of his alumni, donors, and hopefully he'll be able to get some type of maybe a little bit of wiggle room and some admissions, which I think schools are starting to do more of today, especially when it comes to recruiting African American kids. It's just not the same playing field. You have to make some exceptions. To me, it's not fair not to. And so if Cal can do those things, and I think that Mark, will be in a position to do well. And so we'll see what happens. But Al McGuire told me years ago, he said, never stay at one place too long. And I never forgot when he said that. He says the posse's coming to get you. But and do I am I proud of what we did? Yes. But I've been supportive of every coach that's been here. I know I've been in their shoes. I know how hard the job is. And I just want to see Cal get back to doing the things it did and building the kind of relationships and seeing some of the successful student athletes that went through here. There has been some tradition here, and it'll be great to bring that tradition back. I'm still close with Jason Kidd, for example, and Dennis Gates had played for me. Now he's coaching Missouri, and some of these people, Shante Leggins, David, played for you and me, is doing very well at obviously at Portland. And Joe Pasternak coached with me, doing well at UC Santa Barbara. And there's Alex Pribble just get hired at Idaho. These are Cal guys that coached at Cal, and they're doing very well. And Keith Ambrot coached for me. These are so many guys that I'm fortunate that I was around as either a player, their coach, as their coach, or as their leader as a head coach. So there's been a lot of storied people that's gone through this program. So I hope the tradition could come back. I think it'd be great to see it come back.
It would be nice to have that up there in the Bay Area, which in general, the whole area has a great basketball heritage.
No question.
You've become a very good basketball analyst. You've worked for the Pac-12 network, ESPN, Westwood One, which also means that, you're still watching a lot of college basketball. So, again, another sort of a long entry into a question here, but I'm about your age. I've been watching the NC2A tournament since the 60s, and I can't ever remember a year like this one with, first of all, shout out to Dusty May and FAU.
Absolutely.
Getting into the Final Four. Jim Dutcher, who was a long time assistant, now making his run with San Diego State. Of course, of late, in the past 5 years or so, roughly, there have been more upsets. the upset of Purdue this year and Kentucky to St. Peter's prior being the most memorable to me. But I have to tell you, Ben, they don't actually shock me anymore, although
No.
I still get surprised. I mean, because even with the better teams having one and dones leave for the NBA, they're still getting the best of what's out there, the best of the top 100 recruits, and they're also getting their pick of transfers from the portal. The smaller schools do tend to put out an older, more mature lineup. I think, first of all, there isn't actually that much difference, and I'd like you to speak to this.
No.
There actually isn't that
No,
much
and
difference
you're
between the high major
right.
talent and the mid-major talent, right?
No, you're going to get me on a subject, but I'm happy to take it because I feel very strongly about it. And I said this just a couple of years ago. It's not going to surprise me to see a Ivy League school, an Ivy League school that might make it to Final Four. Why? Because they get seniors, they get guys that have been there. They're able to build their program. They've got excellent coaching, and they've got financial aid packages they can get too. So the level, the playing field is leveled now. And my best teams at mid majors were as good as the teams I had at high majors. You just can't separate and say just because you're at a high major, your teams are automatically better. And I don't call some of these games upsets. The prognosticators, some of the media call it upsets, but I've coached those kids, and I had 24 guys that made it to the NBA, and a lot of those kids that made it, were in the mid majors. They worked their way up. They weren't high school All-Americans. They got better, and then they ended up having their teams do well. I can solve the problem, and I'll say it on your podcast. Maybe this it'll be picked up. But I think the solution to all this is simply it goes back to my inclusivity versus exclusivity. I really believe that not only should the tournament be expanded to make for better teams and more teams getting in. In football, you can be 500, you go to a bowl, you're a success. In basketball, you're not in the top 60, or you go to the NIT, you're a failure. There's something wrong with that picture. All these teams that played in the NIT could have played in the NCAA, and they could have won some games. And how about the teams that played in the play-in a couple of years ago, UCLA and VCU? They get down to the Final Four. So tell me there's something that's not, that system, there's not something wrong with our system. There is. And we should have more teams in. And so where do you draw the line? Then it becomes, do you draw it at 90, 100? And I would say simply that I like the idea. I'm from Chicago. We had Indiana, same way. You had a old-fashioned playoff system, and every team got a chance to play in the NCAA in the high school tournament. I would love to see every team get in the NCAA tournament. I think it'd be what you see, quote, maybe more interesting NCAA tournament. You get a true champion. You would get the opportunity for more people to celebrate the NCAA. What about teams that get injured? What about teams that aren't in big conferences? They then, it's not political. What conference are you from? You try to say, they say, play a better schedule. Well, you can't, because nobody wants to come play if you're a major and you're good. So you take away all the things you can't control, and then you just go into the tournament and you play at the end of the year. And let me tell you what else it does, guys. It gives you and your fan base a chance to stay with your team the whole year long. A lot of fan bases give up on their team if they think they're not going to the NCAA, and so you don't continue to watch the game. But if you know everybody's going to play at the end of the year, how about Bob Evans? He has his best team ever. He's supposed to win the national championship. He plays in a conference tournament, a meaningless conference tournament, where he's already number one ranked team in the country. He plays games for nothing. And Kenyon Martin goes down, and he never wins that national championship. That should tell you there's something wrong with this system. The conference tournaments, in my opinion, should be replaced. And money is the reason they're not, but they should be replaced with one more week of postseason, NCAA tournaments. You'd only have to start a week earlier. And then, by the way, I got one more idea I'll throw on you, and that is then your regular season champion, which means nothing right now. Nobody even remembers who the regular season champion is, and nor should they. You don't get anything for it. But if you actually won your league, now I think you get a first round bye. Now I think you get a regional game. You play in your local area, but make the regular season worth something. You get an automatic bye into the tournament.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir on that one.
Yeah. So I even if you don't take 300 some teams, which I think you could if you eliminated conference tournaments, even if you took, half of that, or you took like football, you took all the teams that you're going to get a great tournament. You're going to see more upsets, so to speak, more matchups. You'll settle which teams are really the best, because now it doesn't matter what conference you play.
Body of work, I think, should count more than who's hot at the end. To me, I've never understood, you play say 18 conference games in the ACC,
That's
and you lose in the first or second round, and maybe you don't get a bid, right? That the automatic bid should be for the conference.
I mean, in mid majors, those teams I had that went on to beat those teams that we mentioned would never have played in the tournament if we didn't win our conference tournament, and we had great teams.
Yeah.
So that's case in point. And FAU, how about the Florida Atlantic? They might have gotten a large bid this year, but most of the time the Florida Atlantics don't get the large bid. And Dusty May deserved to be in this. He was one shot away from going to a championship and maybe winning the thing. And so, but you don't get that chance if you're in a mid-major. And win your conference tournament, you don't go.
Yeah, and head-to-head ought to count for something. Now, of course, I'm biased. He's a friend of mine, but Steve Forbes at Wake Forest, they beat NC State 3 times this year. And yet,
I did their game.
And NC State goes to the tournament, and Wake Forest doesn't. Now, maybe neither deserve to go, but something screwy about that too. Well, why are we playing the games?
No, it's not right. And for you to decide, that a couple of points, maybe you didn't beat his team by as many points as you should have beat him because they like you to build your rankings, net rankings, and it used to be RPI, so you don't beat up on a team, you don't pad the games. Those are ridiculous reasons. Coaches don't care about lines, spreads of the game. They don't care about how many points you're supposed to be. They just try to win the game. And all of a sudden, you don't make it to the tournament, you're probably going to lose your job if you don't get in the tournament more than a couple of years in a row. And I just mentioned my story. It happened to me. We went to the NIT the year that my contract wasn't renewed, and we were pretty good, but we wasn't good enough. And then the year we didn't advance to a second or third round game, we were made to be like we were failures. And I don't think that you would have that kind of pressure on coaches. You would celebrate your team's wins. And everybody we get a chance to play, I think would be wonderful for the game. I just think we got to step up and improve our game.
Well, as you mentioned, I think that's a valuable sidebar. I think there would be more stability if everybody's going to the tournament instead of having this constant turnover of coaches. I in my mind,
players, Dave. How about players?
Yeah, it would be cut by half.
Players want to go play in the tournament.
Yeah.
So if as a player, if you're playing the NCAA tournament every year, you'd stick with your school a little bit longer, I believe. And coaches wouldn't play musical chairs. They'd say, well, listen, or they wouldn't try to get out before they were asked to get out. You're going to build your program. There'll be more stability, more fun, and just imagine all the parents of kids that are, if my kids play in college basketball and they get a chance to play in an NCAA tournament, I'm ecstatic. But if they're only one of 50 or 60 teams that get to play in one, and because they missed out on a technical or a issue or maybe a point spread or
something like that.
Yeah. Certain teams get injured, they should still be able to play in a tournament. They shouldn't be penalized for that. And so the team that's good at the end of the tournament is who's going to win the tournament. Didn't matter what you did earlier. It's got to be you build your team and get it ready at the end, and let's see where the chips lie. That's what I think should happen.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's the best way to go about it. And who knew it? It took the three of us to put our heads together to come to this conclusion and solve this big problem.
Well, the other thing is that, like you say, if you get rid of the conference tournaments, you only add about another week to the season?
Maybe. Yeah. I'm not even sure you do, because if you take all the teams that won their conference and you give them a first round bye, you're not. They're eliminated. They're going to move on. I think you would just start the tournament a week later, and a week before, and then you can do this. But Mike Krzyzewski finally said this in his last year or two. He said he absolutely was for earlier in his career. And as I was too. Was I don't think I need to play in a conference tournament. But then you start thinking, well, it's more elite if you get in. But even Mike Krzyzewski said at the end of his career, I think more teams should be in the tournament. He was a big proponent of that, and I thought he was right. Yeah. I think you need some of the high major coaches to say, look, I'm going to get in every year. Our team's a blue blood team. But, John Calipari, these people say, no, let's expand the tournament. I think more people should have this opportunity. I think you'd have one of the greatest, tournaments and championship tournaments you'd ever see. It would be how many weeks of great basketball would you see? And fun basketball. But you just think how excited people get in high school tournaments when everybody's going to play in the thing, and not just the teams that had good records. It's I just always remember that from my high school days in Illinois, and I've heard it the same thing in Indiana. It's a true championship.
Yeah. And then
politics.
Yeah. And then schools get to play other schools that they never would ordinarily
Oh, that's right.
get to play.
That's right. Oh, and
Yeah.
by the way, you'd schedule differently now. If
Yeah.
if I'm at a school, I wouldn't go. I'd play anybody because I'm not going to get penalized for playing somebody.
Yeah,
I could
right.
play
That's right.
another
Yeah.
school. In fact, I probably would play a mid-major or lesser
Yeah.
school because that's who you might play in the tournament. You might as well have
Yeah.
a few of those on your schedule, and then so you're not going to get penalized by just trying to build your record up, trying to get your record. You're going to play a bunch of different games.
Makes your team better, and the fans benefit as well.
Oh yeah.
Well, let's get this. We just got to get this podcast out and about, and if this thing gets changed, we'll take credit for it as we should.
That's right.
Ben,
As
I'm
we
really
should,
sorry
right?
to say this, but we're out of time. It's been
Oh,
great.
man.
As I've told a few of our other guests, we could have done this as a 2-part thing. We could easily do 2 hours, no problem.
Now, let me say this, and I want to close in this because you guys give me a platform to talk about something that's very dear to my heart, basketball and my family. Obviously, I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son, and my wife and I are very proud parents. But my passion is basketball. And food. I won't tell you which is which, but you Dave knows. And music. I also happen to like jazz. But you've given me an opportunity to talk about something that I really love, and more so, you've given me an opportunity to be on your podcast and speak with you guys because I just wish more people in the media and more people could do what you guys do. I think it's wonderful. It's not just me doing this with you, but I will go back and listen to the other podcasts. I think you get a chance to get guests on. You'll ask them provocative questions, things that the public, I think, would love to hear, and you do it in a personal way. And your passion, I know your guys' passion for basketball too. So thank you for having me as your guest. I'll do part 2, part 3, anytime you want, but it will have to be at a restaurant.
Yeah, right.
We could arrange that.
Yeah.
We could do it on the road.
We could put that together.
Saul's Deli in Berkeley, or we can go to New York, coast to coast.
No, we're going to Vegas to the rib place.
Smoke City.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
We'll do a remote.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you for having me on, guys, and I hope we can stay in touch outside of there, and I'm sure we will. But thanks so much.
Well, we both
Thank
appreciate
you.
your generosity, Ben, and it was wonderful of you to come on and do the show, and you really were a great guest. You know,
were.
so you're definitely going to be invited back at some point.
My pleasure, my honor.
Great.
My best to you and yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
All right, guys, thank you. That's my wife calling. I better get the call.
Okay.
You guys,
Take care.
Good timing.
Bye.
And that is it. We've just wrapped up with Ben Braun from the Captain's Table, and please stay tuned for the next episode of the Captain's Table.